This is Next Radio 2017 with Broadcast Bionics.
Hi. There it is. So, Penguin really needs no introduction. It's one of the most iconic brands publishing the biggest authors around the world. Penguin came to us a couple of years ago and tasked us to help them sell more audiobooks. Now, the problem with audiobooks is that they have a slightly dusty reputation. The reality is really different. Penguin's audiobooks are innovative, really high production values, and they attract some of the biggest authors, readers in the world. Benedict Cumberbatch, Kate Winslet, David Walliams, to name a few. So we knew to sell more audiobooks, we needed people to hear them and hear how good they are, to sample them. So we decided to target people that already love audio, and that's people that listen to podcasts. So we created the Penguin podcast. Each episode is an in-depth interview with an author about their latest book. And in the conversation, we sort of weave in clips, extracts from the audiobooks. Now, the problem with authors doing interviews about their latest book is they do quite a lot of them. So the high-profile authors can do 5 in a day, from the Today programme to the One Show. And often they'll get asked the same questions over and over again. So we wanted to do something different. So we decided to sort of turn it on its head and give the interview back to the author. So we created the format where each guest, each author, brings with them 5 objects into the Penguin studio and talks about these objects, how they inspired and shaped the writing of their latest book. Here's a few examples of some weird and smelly things that have been brought into the studio. But by doing this, it means that the author chooses where the conversation goes, so they're really relaxed. It means we get really personal stories that we don't hear on every other chat show. And most importantly, I think, is that the authors really enjoy it. I'm going to play you a few examples now of some of our guests talking about their objects. First up is the lovely Claire Balding.
You know, I look at it and I just think, gosh, that torch, the idea of linking everybody around the country through the torch relay, which I think built up to it beautifully. And I carried the torch through Newbury High Street. And my parents came to watch, and my nephews came, and my sister-in-law and Alice, my partner. And I remember Uncle Toby came as well, who's sadly no longer with us. And he was very visually impaired by then. But I saw him when I got off the little bus to do my section. I ran over and gave him a hug, and I said, "I can't believe you've come." And he said, "I just wanted to hear this."
Next up is Johnny Marr from The Smiths with his object.
The reason I've got this £20 note is because I always have to have a £20 note in the back right-hand pocket when I play concerts. I just got this notion before we went on stage one night at Dingwalls that you're on the way up, you should be feeling lucky. But I had no money in my pocket, so I thought, come on, you've got to feel a bit more regal. So yeah, I went to the manager, I said, "Joe, have you got any money? What for?" "I need to feel lucky." So he looked at me, you know, idiot. So anyway, he gave me a £10 note and I put it in my back pocket. Yeah. And lo and behold, it was the first of our great ever gigs. It got upgraded to a 20 when I walked out on stage at the Oakland Coliseum with the Pretenders, opening for U2 to 90,000 people. As I walked out, it occurred to me that I need to upgrade, so I stuck $20 in my pocket.
Final example from politician Harriet Harman.
This rosette has been all around the country. It's been everywhere. When I first was a candidate, and for many years I had my kids often would come, I'd take them with me campaigning, they'd be hanging onto the tassels of the rosette, it'd have baby dribble on it, you know, I'd be going to endless party dinners, it'd have chicken curry dropped on it, and it was my badge of pride of being Labour.
So hopefully those clips demonstrate the fact that bringing in the objects, you get really, really personal stories. It's quite a lengthy production process in order to make it kind of flow, as well as reading the books and listening to the audiobooks. Our producers also speak to the guests in advance. Here's an example of correspondence with Irvin Welsh. So we just kind of really get a feel for what they're going to be talking about. And it also means that they're really invested and we know they're going to, look forward to the interview as well. So we had our format. Next we needed a presenter. We wanted someone surprising, someone a bit quirky. Dignified but flippant is the ethos behind the Penguin logo, and we thought that was quite a nice brief for our presenter. So using that, we came up with Richard E. Grant. Now, the great thing about Richard is that he's inherently nosy and extremely charming, which is two really good qualities for an interviewer. He also just makes people feel really, really relaxed, and people kind of open up to him a lot. So I'm going to play you a quick example now of when he interviewed Chris Packham.
You were suicidal at one point, weren't you?
A couple of times.
And what saved you?
The first time, I think, was a lack of sincerity in the degree of, the suicidal urges. It was more about other people and less about me. On the second occasion, in the early 2000s, it wasn't about other people. And on that occasion, I was far more serious about it. And I think that one of the things that led to my comfort with the idea was we've already touched upon. And that was, the good parts of my life, not the bad. Mm-hmm. I felt that I'd had a very complete life. I'd had extraordinary good fortune to see so many and feel and meet so many of the things that I'd wanted. I couldn't have, at that point in time, have said that I hadn't had a rich and rewarding life. And in a way, that sort of strengthened my position, my argument, if you like. As it was, the first time I didn't have enough pills, and on the second occasion when I was seriously thinking about it, I had my dogs there. And I love the dogs as much as I love that bird, and they, in their way, they love me back, and I couldn't leave them on their own. I was in a place where I couldn't leave them on their own, so that was it, really.
Powerful stuff. The other great thing about Richard is that he's great in front of a live crowd, which was handy when we took the podcast to Cambridge for a Bill Bryson special. So Richard was brilliant to launch the podcast. He was a great name. But as the podcast was getting more successful, we wanted to do more episodes. His sort of acting career was having a bit of resurgence, and Hollywood came calling and took him away. So we decided by this point we'd sort of built such a strong format that we were going to replace him with a pool of presenters. So we have Paul Smith, who's the frontman from Maximo Park and a massive bookworm, Connie Hook and David Baddiel. So each of our presenters just brings something completely different to the studio, and it means we can match up the guest and the host and just to get the best out of both of them. So since we've launched, we've been recognised by the Webby Awards, the British Podcast Awards, had loads of great write-ups in various publications. Just going to leave you quickly with some takeaways. Obvious, but know the audience. For me, this is really important when it comes to booking the guests. Do your audience care enough about this guest to listen to them for up to an hour? People are much more interesting when they're talking about things they're interested in, so find a vehicle to get to these stories and to find the passions. We didn't want it to be the Richard E. Grant podcast. It was a Penguin podcast, so we wanted a format that was stronger than the presenter. So think about that if longevity is important to you. Obvious, but we have a professional photographer that comes to the studio. We make lovely assets, and because they look nice, our guests and iTunes and our hosts are more likely to share the assets and shout about the show. And finally, if you are a brand, don't shoehorn in your product. Find a way to kind of build them into the format, into the narrative of the podcast like we do with the audiobooks. Thank you very much.
The old Megan was snatched up into